Oh.
I bought 12 copies of this book, Race and Races by Richard A. Goldsby. I bought 12 copies of this book, and I shipped them out all over the world at my expense. All over the world. All the way from Poland to England to South Africa. This is a picture of Professor Goldsby. I've had several incidents happen in my historical past. These are autobiographies, so don't take offense. These are things that happened to me. I was a veteran. I was in the United States Army. 2 times when I lived in Trenton during the winter, my car slid sideways. And unfortunately, there's a female driving another car parallel with me. And she appeared to be a person of color. I screamed at her. I says, "Watch out! Watch out!" Because the car was sliding sideways on the ice and the snow. She gave me a nasty stare like I was screaming an insult at her. Please, I beg of you, I plead with you. Do not presume, if you do not hear a person clearly, what they are yelling at you. I can't imagine what she thought I was screaming. But if our cars had slid and crashed into one another, neither one of us would have ever gotten to where we were intending to go. And God forbid somebody should be killed or injured. That was my intention of screaming. The car slid sideways on the ice and the slush. It was one of these wet snows that sometimes freeze. And both women, 2 separate incidences, gave me a glare like I was screaming some epithet or some insult at them. I was not. I said, "Watch out! Watch out!" Thank God we didn't crash, but the car certainly made the motions to do it. And just recently at the local supermarket, I also screamed, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" There were cars that were driving very fast in the parking yard or car park. They should have been driving slowly, but they weren't. And they were playing games with the car. A car, an automobile, can be a weapon. It can kill and injure people. In past posts, both on my Facebook and my Adger Ellis blog, I made comical comments about people who are careless with automobiles. This was intended as a warning, not as a practice. This was intended as a parable, a just so story, not to do these things, not to drive your car recklessly. So I screamed at the person, "What are you doing?" Because the cars were playing tag, leap tag, sort of through the entrances at very rapid speed, and I was afraid of having a car crash. So the guy drove about 30 feet and then got out of the car like he was going to hit me. He also was a person of color. I didn't scream an epithet. I was concerned not only for his life, but I was concerned for my life, my car. But apparently, somehow, some way, people project, and I am not picking on people of color, but people of all types project their inner turmoil out into the world. They have transference. You cannot assume what a person says unless you clearly hear what they say. I was handcuffed and dragged off to a police station because some waitress misquoted me to two police officers who were in the restaurant. I said, "Is there any problem, officer?" And the waitress quoted me as saying, "What's your problem, officer?" Like I was being antagonistic. And of course the officers got angry because the waitress misquoted me. You don't have to believe me. But I'm telling you what, if you look at my past videos, my past blogs, you'll find out that in spite of the histrionics, in spite of the demonstrations and gesticulations, I'm a rather passive person. That all my histrionics and all my gesticulations are theater to keep your attention. Comprende? I was brought up to my maturity. My first sexual encounter was during the 1960s. There was a lot of problems in the 1960s with the Vietnamese War and the killing of President Kennedy, the murder and assassination of Martin Luther King, the murder and the assassination of Robert Kennedy. What is wrong with this generation? That they've lost the rebellious spirit in an intellectual way, in a scholarly way, in an academic way? Have you missed the point of what the 60s were all about? The 60s were just as corrupt as the times are now. But generally speaking, with few exceptions, you don't lift your fist. You don't take a gun. You don't take a knife. You use your intellect. You use your academic training. You use your intelligence to rebel. Not take a car and drive it crazy. Not take an automobile and try to crash into some innocent person that you don't even know. The whole 60s was about rebellion against a corrupt society and against a corrupt government. But with a few exceptions, it was an intellectual rebellion. It was an academic rebellion. It was a rebellion of mind. You can do this again. Use your mind. Use your intellect. Use your intelligence to rebel. Don't be violent. Violence is the action of a fool. A simpleton, if I may use that expletive. Or somebody who's just plain stupid. There are other movies during the 60s. You notice this is still in cellophane. Movies of the 60s. There were many British films in America. And sorry to say, these books about motion pictures, for the large part, do not have the British films in them. One of my favorite British films is The Virgin Soldiers. And I'll go back to that. It was about the British troops in Indochina. Indochina changed to what we would call Vietnam. Remember the word Vietnam? Or is history too far gone for this present generation to remember Vietnam and the social rebellion that went on in America? It was a British film. It was called The Virgin Soldiers. And the British were stationed in Indochina, which later changed to Vietnam. And they had the same problems in Indochina that the Americans had in Vietnam. I wonder why. Why don't people ever learn from history? That's a rhetorical question, and I'm not angry. I'm just showing histrionics. I'm being emotive. There was another film that was British, and though there are some people who are so anti the cultural rebellion of the 60s that they've corrupted the name of this film and made it a slander. But the film was called Four-Letter Words. I believe that was the name of the film. W-O-R-K. Work. W-O-R-K. Four-letter word. Of course it was being ironic. Of course it was being provocative, just like the beginning of this video was being provocative. But what's wrong with being provocative if you don't hurt anybody? I didn't lift my fist. I didn't take a gun. I didn't take a knife. So what's wrong with being provocative? Or is it the idea? Is it the idea that you don't like? I seem to remember something about the Bill of Rights. It's not the government. It's not the military. It's not the security agencies that take away your Bill of Rights, your freedom of speech and the right to assemble. It's you who do not have the courage to use the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, the right to trial by jury. Yeah, the film was four-letter word called Work. And you know what it was about? It was about growing magic mushrooms. It was about growing magic mushrooms. I'm not going to ruin the film for you. I hope sometime in the future the film's available. It's been withdrawn, probably because it was too provocative. Because even this generation, as dullard, and in some cases simpletons that they are, internet junkies who are too stupid to read a book. I'm sorry I used that expletive, he says sarcastically. They're just mentally challenged because they rely on the internet. Hello? Anyway, the film was about psychedelic mushrooms. There was another film called The Strawberry Statement, which is very difficult to get. And it was about jocks fighting hippies. And there was a remarkable sentence by one of the hippie characters in the locker room when the jocks were bullying and harassing the hippie. He said, after he got out of the locker room to talk to his girlfriend, he said, "Are all the jocks queer?"